It was a Monday evening, and the air inside the Gilded Spoon, a restaurant that tried very hard to look fancy but mostly just looked expensive, was thick with the smell of old leather and too much garlic butter. Amelia was 19 years old, and you could tell just by looking at her that she was trying to be invisible. She was a young black woman, quiet and slim, and she moved around the crowded dining room like a ghost. Her skin was the color of rich, dark coffee, and she kept her natural curls pulled back tightly into a bun that barely escaped her work uniform. Her eyes, large and a deep, nervous brown, were always fixed on the floor or the task at hand. She wore the standard waitress uniform, a crisp, white-collared shirt that always seemed a little too tight across her shoulders, and a black skirt that stopped just below the knee. Her shoes were worn and squeaked a tiny bit when she hurried. She was saving every penny she made, working double shifts most days, and the constant stress had etched a faint, worried line right between her brows. Tonight, Amelia was trying to balance 3 heavy trays filled with sticky dessert plates and half-finished wine glasses. She needed to get back to the kitchen, clock out, and run home before the last bus left. She was squeezing past the largest, most intimidating table in the entire restaurant. This wasn't a table of businessmen, this was their table. The table where Mr. Silas Croft and his men sat every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Everyone knew who Silas Croft was, or at least, they knew enough to stay far away from him. He was a man who owned half the city's legitimate businesses and, people whispered, all the illegitimate ones. Silas Croft sat at the head of the polished oak table. He was a white man in his late 40s, built like a retired heavyweight boxer, with the kind of expensive, tailor-made suit that looked like it cost more than Amelia earned in a year. His dark hair was meticulously combed back, and his eyes, the startling, ice blue kind, seemed to miss absolutely nothing. He carried himself with a quiet, dangerous calm. He didn't have to shout or wave his hands. When Silas Croft spoke, the entire room seemed to dim just to listen. He wasn't loud, but he was powerful. Tonight, Silas was flanked by 2 of his key men. The one closest to Amelia was Ronan. Ronan was a giant of a man, about 6'5", with a shaved head and a neck thicker than Amelia's waist. He was wearing a slightly loud, expensive grey jacket, and he had a giant gold watch gleaming on his wrist. He was sipping a bright, crimson-colored cocktail, something with a heavy dark rum base. This was the moment that changed everything. Amelia felt the squeak of her old shoe catch on a loose floorboard. She tried to correct her step, but the heavy trays shifted. In one horrible, sickening moment of slow motion, the tray tilted, and Ronan's crimson drink went flying. It wasn't a huge spill, but it was perfectly aimed. The dark rum cocktail splashed right across the front of Ronan's expensive grey jacket, leaving a wet, sticky, bright red stain right over his chest. The noise of the glass hitting the thick rug, the sharp inhale of breath from the nearby host, and the sudden, total silence from Ronan's table shook the entire restaurant. Ronan stopped chewing the steak he was eating. His huge hands, which had been holding a fork, slowly dropped to the table. He didn't move an inch. He just stared down at the dark, ugly stain on his chest. The music, which had been playing some soft, boring jazz tune, sounded like it had been physically cut off. Every single waiter, every hostess, and every diner in that huge room stopped what they were doing and froze. They were all looking at Amelia, who was standing there, heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. "Oh, I am so sorry, sir. I am so terribly sorry," Amelia stammered, her voice tiny and trembling. She fumbled for the napkin tucked into her uniform, a cheap paper thing, knowing it was useless against the sticky, dark liquid. Ronan slowly lifted his head. His expression wasn't angry yet, which was worse. It was just a heavy, blank look that felt like a ton of bricks. He was slowly deciding what to do to her. Everyone in the room knew a spill on Ronan meant big trouble. Then, the focus shifted. All eyes went to the head of the table. Silas Croft, the boss, hadn't moved a muscle. He had been talking in a low voice to the man across from him. Now, he simply stopped talking. He didn't look angry, he didn't look surprised. He just looked bored. He slowly lowered his glass of water to the table. That tiny sound, the clink of the glass, was the loudest noise in the whole place. Silas Croft then slowly lifted his eyes to Amelia. His gaze was sharp and completely calm, like looking into a winter lake. "Come here," he said. His voice was not loud, but it cut through the silence like a knife. Amelia wanted to disappear. She wanted the floor to open up and swallow her whole. Her legs felt like jelly, but she took a small, shaky step toward the table. Ronan looked like he was about to speak, but Silas held up one hand, not even looking at Ronan, and the giant immediately shut his mouth and stared straight ahead. "Go to my office," Silas instructed Amelia. His tone was flat, completely devoid of emotion. "Wait there." He then stood up. He was taller than Amelia expected, and the presence he projected made the already quiet room seem oppressive. He nodded slightly to his two men, then started walking toward the back of the restaurant where the private offices were located. Everyone watched Amelia. The look on the faces of the staff, the cooks peering out from the kitchen, the host leaning against the wall, was pure pity and terror. They all thought the same thing: she's done for. The boss is going to make an example of her. Amelia felt a cold, sick wave wash over her. She knew she was going to be fired, maybe worse. She quietly dropped the empty tray on the nearest service station, straightened her slightly rumpled skirt, and followed Silas Croft's straight, unhurried path. As she walked, she caught the eye of the kitchen manager, an older woman named Maria, a kind, hard-working black woman from Jamaica who had always been good to Amelia. Maria just shook her head, her face etched with deep worry. It was a silent goodbye. Amelia pushed open the door to Silas Croft's private office. It was small, dark, and smelled like expensive cigars and leather. There was a huge desk, a few heavy chairs, and a window overlooking the city street outside, which was now blurred with the late-night traffic lights. She stood just inside the door, her hands clenched so tightly her knuckles were white. She waited, bracing herself for the shouting, the threats, or the immediate termination. Silas Croft walked past her, went straight to the desk, and took off his suit jacket, folding it neatly over the back of the chair. He loosened his tie, but still didn't look at her. He seemed like a man preparing for a long, boring paperwork session, not a confrontation. He finally turned. His blue eyes locked onto hers, and he didn't offer a word about the spilled drink. He didn't mention Ronan's ruined jacket. He simply leaned against the edge of his desk and asked the question that made Amelia's blood run cold, the question that meant he knew more than she could ever imagine. "Why are you hiding your real name, Alana?" Amelia, no, Alana, felt the breath leave her body. The air in the small office seemed to vanish. The room started to spin a little. She felt dizzy. I don't know what you mean, sir," she whispered, the lie tasting like ash on her tongue. Her carefully constructed life, the one she had spent 3 long years building from scratch, was crumbling around her. Silas Croft didn't blink. He reached down into his inner jacket pocket and slowly pulled out a laminated card. It wasn't an ID or a license. It was a picture. He held it up for her to see. It was a photograph of a much younger woman, maybe 16 or 17, standing on a bright, sunny beach, her hair loose, a genuine, wide, happy smile lighting up her face. The girl in the picture was wearing a simple silver necklace. It was her. Alana. The person she had been before she had to run. "The girl in this picture," Silas said, his voice still low and even, "is Alana Johnson. Daughter of Dr. Elias Johnson, one of the most respected pediatric surgeons in the state. She went missing 3 years ago, right after her father passed away. The authorities said she simply ran away from home." He paused, his gaze boring into her. "You are wearing the exact same necklace right now. Just tucked under your shirt." Amelia instinctively reached a hand up to the neckline of her uniform shirt, her fingers finding the small, cold metal of the silver chain she always wore. She dropped her hand quickly, as if she'd been burned. The jig was up. There was no denying it now. Her throat tightened, making it hard to swallow. I had to leave," she finally admitted, her voice shaking badly. She couldn't call him sir anymore. That level of subservience felt pointless now that her entire life was exposed. "My father, he died. And everything went wrong. The house, the money. I couldn't stay." Silas Croft walked around his desk and sat in his chair. He leaned back, his powerful frame looking relaxed, completely in control. "It's more than that, Alana," he corrected gently. "Alana Johnson didn't run away because she lost the house. She ran away because she was scared. And I know what you were scared of." He reached into a drawer and pulled out a small, folded piece of paper. He placed it carefully on the desk. "This is a copy of your father's life insurance policy," he explained. "It's worth a lot. Enough to make someone very greedy. And the beneficiary was not you. It was his younger brother, your uncle, Arthur Johnson. Amelia's eyes welled up with tears. The memory of her kind, loving father was a painful, sharp stab in her heart. Uncle Arthur, he was never kind, she managed to say. But he seemed okay when Dad died. Then he started asking me things. He wanted me to sign papers, saying I was giving up my rights to the rest of the estate. Then he started telling me that Dad's death wasn't an accident. He said Dad had enemies, and if I didn't sign, those enemies would come for me next. She wrapped her arms around herself, clutching the tight uniform shirt. He terrified me. He locked me in my room for 2 days and kept taking the silver things from the house. When I finally got out, I took a little cash and the first bus going anywhere. I ended up here, in this city, and I changed my name to Amelia. She looked at Silas, confused. But, how do you know all this? Silas Croft steepled his fingers, resting his chin on them, watching her with those piercing blue eyes. He didn't seem like the scary mafia boss everyone thought he was. He seemed like someone studying a very difficult puzzle. Let's just say Dr. Elias Johnson saved someone important to me a long time ago. A favor that was never repaid, Silas explained cryptically. When he passed, I put out feelers to make sure his daughter was okay. I found out you had vanished. And I've been looking for you ever since. He gestured to the chair opposite his desk. Sit down, Alana. You don't have to be scared anymore. The story you told the police, that you ran away, that kept you safe for a while. But your Uncle Arthur is getting bolder. He found out you're alive. He's been asking questions. Alana finally collapsed into the chair, the sheer emotional weight of the last 3 years hitting her all at once. Her secret was out, but the man who exposed her wasn't an executioner, he was a helper. He knows I'm here, she whispered, fear flooding her body again. He knows you're somewhere in the city, working a low-paying job. But he doesn't know you're working for me, Silas said, a hint of a smile touching the corner of his mouth. He won't touch anyone who works for the Croft organization. Not if he wants to keep breathing. He pushed the insurance paper across the desk. This money, Alana, is rightfully yours. But to get it, you have to prove that Arthur coerced you. That's difficult, but not impossible. More importantly, you have to stay safe. Silas stood up, walked to the door, and locked it quietly. He turned back to her, his face serious. Here is what happens now. You are done waiting tables. You are no longer Amelia. You are Alana Johnson, and you are under my protection. You will stay with me for a little while, out of sight. We will figure out how to get you your life back. He walked over to the safe hidden behind a bookshelf and spun the dial. The safe clicked open, and he pulled out a thick wad of cash. Take this, he said, handing her the money. Go home tonight, pack one bag, and get rid of that uniform. Ronan can wait for his cleaning bill. I'll send a driver for you tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock sharp. You need rest. You need safety. And I intend to make sure you get both. Alana stared at the cash, the reality of it all overwhelming her. She had come in expecting a firing and maybe a threat. She was leaving with a new name, a stack of money, and the protection of the most powerful, and possibly dangerous, man in the city. She looked up at Silas Croft, tears streaming down her face, but these were tears of relief, not fear. Why are you doing this for me? She asked simply. Silas gave her a small, almost sad nod. Because, Alana, sometimes, the people who look like monsters are the ones who do the saving. And your father deserved a debt paid. He unlocked the office door, letting the muted sounds of the restaurant spill in. He looked at her one last time. Go, Alana. I'll see you tomorrow. Alana, no longer the timid waitress, walked out of that office, leaving the dirty, sticky uniform behind her. She walked through the silent restaurant, past the shocked faces, and into the cool night air. She felt a lightness she hadn't felt in years. Her life as Amelia was over. Hope, fragile but real, had finally won the night. The morning sun, struggling to break through the thick city smog, felt unusually bright to Alana. She was sitting in the back of a huge, black luxury sedan that smelled faintly of expensive leather and something clean, almost sterile. The driver, a muscular, quiet man named Leo, who wore a dark suit and sunglasses even indoors, had been perfectly on time. Alana was wearing the only nice, non-work clothes she owned, a simple, dark blue knitted dress and comfortable flats. She clutched a worn, cheap backpack containing everything she owned. She wasn't scared anymore, she was numb. The shock of being discovered had given way to a deep, unsettling confusion. Why was a powerful man like Silas Croft helping her? Was it truly just about a debt to her deceased father? The car stopped outside a towering, sleek glass and steel building that looked like it belonged on a postcard of downtown New York City. It was one of the most prestigious commercial addresses in the state. This wasn't just expensive, it was the kind of place that screamed power. Leo escorted her through a lobby so grand it felt like a museum, past security guards who looked like they were carved out of granite, and up in an elevator that went so fast her ears popped. She was finally shown into a massive, corner office high above the city, offering a dizzying view of traffic moving like tiny toys below. The room was mostly glass and light, dominated by a large, minimalist desk. Silas Croft was already there, standing by the window, wearing a crisp, pale gray suit today. He looked even more intimidating in the daylight, his ice blue eyes sharper, his posture commanding. "Good morning, Alana," he greeted her, gesturing to a large, comfortable chair facing the desk. "You must be exhausted. You've been carrying a great weight for 3 years." Alana sat down, placing her backpack carefully by her feet. "Mr. Croft," she began, her voice still quiet but firm. "Thank you for last night. For believing me about my uncle. But I still don't understand what you want." Silas walked over to his desk and sat down. He didn't offer her coffee or make small talk. He leaned forward, and his demeanor instantly shifted from patient helper to serious interrogator. "Let's cut to the chase, Alana. I told you I owe your father a debt. That's true. He saved the life of my brother, who was very sick years ago. I would keep you safe simply for that reason." He paused, his eyes narrowing slightly. "But there's a bigger problem, one that doesn't involve your Uncle Arthur. It involves me." Silas turned on a large, sleek monitor embedded in his desk. The screen flickered to life, showing a grainy, black and white image of the previous night, the restaurant floor. "Remember the spill last night?" Silas asked. "Everyone thought you were a clumsy waitress. But I noticed something else." He played a clip. It was zoomed in on her hands. As Alana had tripped and the glass fell, her body had jerked to the side, but her eyes, for a split second, were not on the falling drink. They were fixed on Ronan's face. "You look terrified," Silas narrated, "but your hands, they moved in a way that ensured the spill would hit Ronan, but also that you wouldn't be hurt by the glass. It wasn't an accident, Alana. It was a practiced, desperate maneuver." Alana felt a hot flush crawl up her neck. She had been so sure she covered her tracks. "I need to know, who sent you?" Silas demanded, his voice remaining level, but carrying a heavy, undeniable force. Alana swallowed hard. "I don't know what you're talking about, Mr. Croft. I was just trying to get through my shift. It was an accident. I was rushing." "Don't insult my intelligence," Silas said simply. He tapped the desk, and the screen changed. Now, the screen displayed a table. On one side, it showed a clear picture of Alana's signature on her application for the waitress job. It was a loose, shaky script labeled Amelia Roberts. On the other side, it showed a very clean, looping, elegant signature labeled Alana Johnson from her high school yearbook. "Inconsistent signatures, which is expected when you're forging a new life," Silas noted. "But then there is this." He clicked again. The screen showed 3 more signatures. They were all small, tight, and highly stylized, almost like a symbol, not a name. They were labeled as authorizations for minor financial transactions, dated 6 months, 9 months, and a year ago. "These," Silas explained, "are the withdrawal authorizations from 3 accounts belonging to known associates of a rival organization, people I happen to be watching closely. Take a good, long look." Alana stared at the signatures. Her face went pale. They were almost identical to a code she had learned years ago, a type of shorthand used by her older cousin, who had worked in international finance and had taught her to write quickly in code. "That can't be mine," she whispered, shaking her head quickly. I don't know those people." "But you know that script," Silas insisted. "It is a highly specialized, specific form of coding signature. Only about a dozen people in this city know it. My best analyst confirms it matches your cousin, Marcus Johnson's, style. Marcus, who was reported missing 2 years ago and who, coincidentally, was rumored to have borrowed heavily from the same rival organization. He stood up and walked around the desk, stopping right behind her chair. Alana could smell his expensive cologne, something woodsy and crisp. Someone paid off Marcus's debt and then sent you here to find something, Silas stated, his voice now a dangerous low growl in her ear. The spill wasn't about Ronan. Ronan's a distraction. The real target was the briefcase I had under the table, which I only bring out when I'm meeting someone specific. The spill would have distracted me long enough for you to get a clear look, or maybe plant a tiny listening device. Your assignment wasn't to hurt me. It was to spy. The air in the room was electric with tension. Alana was trapped. She felt a profound wave of despair wash over her. She realized the truth. The debt to her father was just an angle to make her trust him enough to confess. I don't know anything about Marcus, she lied weakly, though the evidence was stacking up against her. Silas returned to his seat inside, his composure returning, but his eyes remaining hard. Alana, I know you're not a killer. You're a young woman who ran away from a bad uncle and stumbled into a trap set by someone who knew your weakness, your family. He reached into his desk and pulled out a simple, sealed manila envelope. This is proof that the people who paid off Marcus's debt are now hunting you. They have found out that you failed to get the information they wanted last night, and now they see you as a liability. He slid the envelope across the desk to her. Alana's hands were shaking as she opened it. Inside were 2 photographs. One was a grainy picture of her apartment building entrance, taken in the middle of the night. The other was a chilling close-up of a familiar car, a dark sedan that had been parked outside the Gilded Spoon for the last week. The car had 3 men sitting inside, all looking impatient and hard. They're not my people, Alana, Silas said, watching her face crumble. They are from the rival group. They are looking for Amelia Roberts, the waitress who messed up and now knows too much. When they find you, they won't ask questions. They'll solve the liability problem permanently. Alana dropped the photos, burying her face in her hands. The relief she had felt last night evaporated, replaced by a paralyzing terror. She was running out of time and options. I didn't want to hurt anyone, she choked out, tears running down her cheeks. They promised they'd leave Marcus alone if I just went to the restaurant and told them who Silas Croft was meeting on Monday nights. I didn't even know what I was looking for. Silas Croft waited patiently for her to calm down, watching her with a sort of cold assessment. Thank you for the truth, he finally said. It took you long enough. He stood up, walking back to the panoramic window, his back to her. He was giving her space, but the atmosphere remained heavy. Here is the situation, Alana. I have 2 choices, and by the end of this conversation, you will have made your decision. This is your only chance. There is no negotiating this. He turned back, and his expression was absolutely devoid of pity. Option 1, I put you back out on the street. I call my men off. I allow you to be found by the people who sent you. They will take you, and they will probably hurt you until you tell them everything you know about me, which isn't much, but it's enough to be a nuisance. Alana squeezed her eyes shut. She couldn't breathe. Option 2, you stop running. You stop lying. You acknowledge that you have nowhere else to go. You will work for me, directly. You will use your intelligence and your coding skills, the ones you inherited from Marcus, to help me find out who is trying to infiltrate my organization. You will be my eyes, my ears, and my analyst. In return, I will give you more than just safety. I will give you a new identity, a guaranteed, safe place to live, and I will find your cousin, Marcus, and bring him home. He walked over and placed both hands flat on the desk, leaning closer to her. The ultimatum was chillingly clear. You tried to spy on me, and you failed. Now, the people who sent you want you dead. I am the only shield you have left. You either work for me, or I hand you over to the people who are hunting you. Which is it, Alana? Alana stared at the photographs, at the faces of the men who were stalking her. She thought about her dead father, her missing cousin Marcus, and her life as Amelia, a life of endless fear and running. She thought of Silas Croft, the dangerous man who had somehow offered her the only lifeline. She looked up at him, wiping the last of her tears. The fear was still there, but a tiny spark of defiance, the real Alana Johnson, the daughter of a brilliant doctor, ignited in her eyes. "I choose option 2, she said, her voice shaking slightly, but holding firm. "I'll work for you. But you promised. You bring Marcus home safely." Silas Croft smiled. It wasn't a kind smile, but it wasn't malicious either. It was the smile of a man who just won a very high-stakes game. "Done," he confirmed. "Welcome to the organization, Alana. Now, let's get you started. We have a lot of work to do." He reached over and shook her hand firmly. It was the first time in years she felt grounded, even if that ground was now standing right next to the city's most powerful criminal boss. She was no longer just running, she was fighting back. Life inside the towering glass office building felt completely unreal to Alana. She was given a small, private apartment on one of the upper floors. It was simple, almost like a high-end hotel suite, but it was safe. She had new clothes, decent food, and most importantly, no one demanding she scrub burnt butter off plates. But the emotional pressure was immense. She was now working for the man who had exposed her, tasked with stopping the people who were trying to kill her. The first task Silas gave her was simple: go through all the financial data his analysts had flagged in the last 6 months, looking for any recurring pattern, any coded message, any signature that remotely resembled the stylized script she had recognized. She sat at a huge, clean desk in a private, windowless office, staring at screens filled with confusing spreadsheets and financial terms. She was trying to focus, trying to prove she was worth protecting, when her mind snapped back to the night her life ended. It was 3 years ago, just outside Toronto, Canada, in a quiet, wealthy suburb where the houses were big and the fences were high. Alana was 16, and her life was comfortable and secure, if a little lonely since her mother had passed away. Her father, Dr. Elias Johnson, wasn't just a pediatric surgeon, he was known for being intensely secretive about his past. He was a tall, kind black man who always smelled of antiseptic and comfort. He had raised Alana to be tough and smart, teaching her things most girls never learned, like basic coding, defensive driving, and how to spot a lie. This was before her father died of a sudden, unexpected illness that the doctors could never fully explain. This was the night her whole family, the one she didn't know much about, was wiped out. Alana remembered waking up to a sound that wasn't an alarm or thunder. It was a loud, cracking explosion, followed by the frantic, hungry roar of fire. She scrambled out of bed in her simple cotton pajamas. The air was already thick with black, choking smoke, and she could hear shouting downstairs. Not her father's voice, but rough, angry voices she didn't recognize. Her father had only one rule for emergencies: always go to the hidden safe behind the painting. Gasping, coughing, Alana ran to her father's study. The beautiful antique Persian rug was already curling and melting from the heat coming up from the floorboards. She grabbed the painting, a picture of a lonely sailboat on a calm sea, and yanked it off the wall. The metal safe was exposed. Her fingers were shaking so hard she could barely input the code: her birthday. The heavy door swung open, revealing the small, empty space inside. Her father had already removed the important documents. But sitting right there, in the middle of the empty safe, was a small, plain wooden box. It was maybe the size of a paperback book. It looked old and utterly unremarkable, except for the large, heavy brass lock on its front. She knew she shouldn't be here. She could hear the shouts getting closer, louder. Alana grabbed the small locked box and tucked it into the waistband of her pajamas. It felt heavy and strangely cold against her skin. She didn't run out the front door, she knew better. Her father had taught her the back paths. She ran through the burning kitchen, dodging falling pieces of the ceiling, and smashed through the back window of the sunroom using a heavy garden gnome. She hit the grass and kept running, never looking back at the house that was quickly being consumed by the flames. She ran until her lungs burned and the heat was a distant memory. Later, the police said it was an electrical fire. But Alana knew better. She had heard the men, the shouting, the distinct sound of a physical struggle right before the final explosion. It wasn't an accident. She found out the next day, reading the papers at a gas station 10 miles away, that her father's 2 remaining brothers, and her cousin Marcus, who was an up-and-coming banker, had all been targeted in coordinated attacks across the city that same night. Her entire family, the secretive, powerful Johnson family, had been destroyed overnight by a rival crime syndicate. Alana had been running ever since that night, relying on her wits and the small savings her father had left her in a secret bank account. She hadn't gone to the police. Her father had always warned her, the police can't protect you from the things we deal with. She still had the box. It was the only thing she had salvaged from her old life. She kept it hidden, always. Right now, it was tucked deep into her cheap backpack, which was resting in a drawer in the safe apartment. Alana didn't even know what was inside. She had spent hours trying to pick the lock, but the brass mechanism was too complicated. She had tried breaking the wood, but it was surprisingly reinforced. A wave of cold doubt washed over her. What if it was just full of old photographs? Or meaningless trinkets? But her father, Dr. Johnson, was not a man who left behind meaningless things. He had looked at that box, placed it in the safest spot in the house, and left it there for her to find as his home burned down. It had to be important. It had to be the reason her family had been targeted. The reason she was still running. Back in Silas Croft's high-rise office, Alana stared at the spreadsheets, pulling herself sharply out of the painful memory. She had a new life now, a new purpose, a new boss. She had to focus. She heard a small, sharp tap-tap on the glass door. Ronan, the giant man whose suit she had ruined, walked in. Ronan looked different now. He was still enormous, but he was wearing a simple, dark turtleneck and trousers, not the flamboyant suit. He carried a small black briefcase. He didn't look like a thug, he looked like a professional bodyguard. "The boss wants you in his main office," Ronan stated, his voice a low rumble. He still didn't look happy about the red stain she'd put on his jacket. "Bring your bag." Alana stood up quickly, grabbing her cheap backpack. She felt the familiar weight of the small locked box inside. She followed Ronan down the hallway. Silas was sitting at his large, minimalist desk, speaking softly into a phone. He looked up, nodded Alana into the chair, and finished his call with a brief, cold sentence, "It's handled." He hung up and focused entirely on Alana. "You're distracted," he observed immediately. "You've been staring at the same sheet of data for 40 minutes. You're thinking about the past." Alana shifted uncomfortably. "I was thinking about the night my family died, Mr. Croft. The fire. And this." She unzipped her backpack, reached inside, and pulled out the small locked box. She placed it on Silas Croft's polished desk. It looked tiny and out of place against the modern setting. Silas's blue eyes widened slightly, the first hint of genuine surprise she had ever seen from him. He reached out a large, careful hand and touched the worn, dark wood. "Where did you get this?" he asked, his voice suddenly very quiet. "It was in my father's safe the night the house burned," Alana explained. "He must have put it there just before whatever happened. I don't know what's inside. I've never been able to open it. It's the only thing I have left." Silas picked up the box. He turned it over in his hands, examining the strange, ornate brass lock. "Alana," he said, looking up at her, his expression now serious and focused. "Your father was not just a doctor. He and his brothers were part of an old organization. They were powerful, but they kept it secret, using their legitimate businesses as cover. The fire, that was an attack by their rivals, the people you almost spied for." He gently placed the box back on the desk. "This box is not just valuable," he continued. "If this is what I think it is, this is the key to everything your family was trying to protect. It's the master registry of your father's organization. It has names, locations, and codes. It's everything the people hunting you, and now me, want." He leaned back, a heavy sigh escaping him. "This little box is why you're in danger, Alana. And it's why you're the most important person in this building right now. We have to find a way to open it, because whatever secrets are inside, they can either destroy us, or they can save us." Alana looked at the box. It wasn't just a memory, it was a ticking time bomb. But for the first time since she started running, she felt a powerful surge of purpose. She wasn't just running from danger, she was holding the key to a future she could fight for. For the next few weeks, Alana threw herself completely into the work Silas had given her. She was determined to prove her worth and, more importantly, stay alive. She spent hours analyzing the coded signatures, the financial transfers, and the weird, off-schedule meetings that Silas's people had flagged. Her brain, which had been dormant for 3 years, suddenly felt alive again, sharp and focused, just like her father had trained her. Silas, meanwhile, had taken the small, locked box. He told her he was having his best security experts look into the mechanism. The lock was old-world, intricate, and specialized, not something a regular locksmith could handle. The routine was tight: work in the office, eat in the guarded executive dining area, and sleep in her safe apartment. She was protected, but completely isolated. One afternoon, Silas called her into his office. "Alana, I need you to run a personal errand for me," he said, handing her a key fob and a small, heavy envelope. "This is highly sensitive, and I won't use my usual couriers. It's too risky. You're the one person nobody expects to see out in the field yet." The envelope contained a single, specific financial instrument that needed to be dropped off at a private address in a wealthy, residential area of Philadelphia, USA. It was simple, low-tech, and relied entirely on trust. "Leo will drive you, but he'll wait 2 blocks away," Silas instructed. "You go in alone, hand the envelope to the woman who answers the door, she will be wearing a jade ring, and leave immediately. No lingering. No talking. Just the exchange." Alana nodded, a nervous knot tightening in her stomach. This was the first time she had been outside the secure building since she moved in. "Be quick, Alana," Silas added, his tone serious. "You're still the one the rival group is looking for, and they are definitely active in that part of the city." Leo, the massive, silent driver, took Alana through the city in the black sedan. When they reached the designated street, Leo pulled over discreetly behind a bakery truck. "5 minutes, Alana," Leo said, his eyes scanning the quiet street. Alana took the key fob, the heavy envelope, and started walking toward the address. The streets were lined with beautiful, historic homes, all with manicured lawns and huge, old trees. She felt exposed and vulnerable in her smart, new clothes. She found the house, went up the steps, and rang the bell. The door opened almost immediately. A woman in her late 60s, elegant and severe, wearing a heavy jade ring, took the envelope with a curt nod, and closed the door. Mission accomplished. Alana let out a quiet sigh of relief and turned to walk back to Leo's waiting car. And that's when she saw them. Just 50 feet down the street, sitting in a black SUV with tinted windows that was parked illegally next to a fire hydrant, were 3 men. Alana's breath hitched. She didn't recognize their faces, but she recognized the car. It was the same sedan from the chilling photograph Silas had shown her, the car that had been stalking her apartment and the restaurant. One of the men, who had a close-cropped beard and wore a dark leather jacket, happened to look out the window right as Alana was passing by. He stared. He stopped. Then, his eyes narrowed, and he suddenly shouted something to the driver, pointing right at her. He recognized her instantly. Not the nervous, clumsy waitress Amelia Roberts, but the young woman who had suddenly disappeared from the restaurant and was now walking out of a known associate's house. The outfit was different, the demeanor was more confident, but the distinctive combination of her dark skin and large, worried brown eyes was unmistakable. Alana didn't hesitate. Adrenaline surged through her. She dropped the key fob and started sprinting toward the spot where Leo was waiting. She heard the roar of the SUV's engine starting up behind her. "Leo! Go!" she screamed as she scrambled into the back seat, fumbling to pull the heavy door shut. Leo didn't even turn his head. He had already seen the aggressive maneuver of the SUV pulling out into traffic. He slammed the accelerator to the floor. The luxury sedan lurched forward with surprising speed. For 5 terrifying minutes, they were in a silent, high-speed chase through the quiet residential streets. The black SUV was relentless, staying right on their tail. "They saw my face, Leo," Alana gasped, clutching the door handle. "They know I'm working for Mr. Croft now." Leo just grunted, taking a hard corner that sent Alana sliding across the back seat. "Don't worry. They won't catch us here." They lost the SUV eventually, melting back into the chaos of the city traffic. But Alana was shaking violently when they finally reached the safety of Silas's skyscraper. She had done the job, but she had failed the second she was recognized. The enemy knew she was with Silas. Silas was waiting for her when she stepped off the elevator. His face was granite, and his ice-blue eyes were blazing. "You were seen," he stated, his voice flat with displeasure. "You were told to be discreet." Alana tried to explain what happened, but Silas cut her off. "It doesn't matter. They know now. You've accelerated the timeline. They know you are not running from your uncle, you are actively working for me. And they want you. He ordered her back to her apartment. Stay there. Do not move. Do not go near the windows. That night, Alana couldn't sleep. Every siren, every distant car horn, made her jump. She was safe, yes, but she felt like a magnet for danger. Around 2 o'clock in the morning, a sound that was definitely not normal woke her up. It was the sound of breaking glass, not the window of her apartment, but somewhere down below, followed by the muffled, sharp pop-pop-pop of what sounded like silenced firearms. The Gilded Spoon restaurant, the place where she had accidentally on purpose spilled the drink, was located on the ground floor of this building. It had been ambushed. Alana jumped out of bed, her heart pounding. She knew, with chilling certainty, that the attack was for her. The rival group knew she was somewhere in the building, and they were trying to flush her out. She huddled in the darkest corner of her room, tears welling up as she realized the terrible consequence of her single mistake that afternoon. Then, she heard the sound of heavy boots running down the hallway outside her room, followed by the sharp, familiar voice of Ronan. Clear the perimeter. She's not here. Move, move, move. The building's security system, a massive, hidden network Alana hadn't even thought about, had kicked into action. She heard brief, violent skirmishes in the stairwell below, the rapid fire of unseen weapons, and then a profound silence. It lasted less than 5 minutes, but it felt like a lifetime. Then, there was a heavy knock on her apartment door. Alana, open up. It's Silas. She fumbled with the locks, her hands shaking, and opened the door. Silas Croft stood there, his hair slightly rumpled, wearing a pair of dark trousers and a simple white t-shirt. He didn't look like a businessman, he looked like a soldier. Behind him, Ronan stood guard, his face grim. Silas stepped inside, his eyes sweeping the room, checking the windows. They came for you, he confirmed, his voice rough. They hit the restaurant first. They thought you might have been hiding out in the office, using the restaurant as a decoy. My security detail neutralized the threat. Alana was trembling uncontrollably. She wrapped her arms around herself. I brought this here. I'm sorry, Mr. Croft. I shouldn't have gone out. Silas walked right up to her. He didn't shout, he didn't even look angry, just intensely focused. Listen to me, Alana, he said, taking her shoulders gently in his large, firm hands. His touch was steadying. You were spotted. That's a mistake. But you ran, and you came straight back here. You did what you were told. I stopped the attack. They didn't even get close to the elevator, let alone your floor. He pulled a small, silver item from his pocket. It was a necklace with a small, discreet button. Wear this. It's a distress beacon. Press it, and Ronan will be at your door in 60 seconds. You are not indebted to me because of the attack. You are under my protection because of the promise I made to your father, and because you're the only one who can help me open that box. He looked into her eyes, which were wide with residual fear. They will come again, Alana. They know where you are now. But they also know I am willing to shed blood to protect my assets. Now, get some sleep. You're safe for tonight. He released her, gave Ronan a short order, and walked out. Alana stood there, clutching the new silver beacon necklace. She looked at the closed door, hearing the distant, muffled sounds of the cleanup downstairs. She was shaken to the core, but the fear was mixed with a huge rush of gratitude. The entire rival crime syndicate had come for her, and Silas Croft, the boss everyone feared, had personally stopped the attack. He had faced down danger to keep her safe. She was deeply, unequivocally indebted to him, not in a financial way, but in the most fundamental way possible. He had saved her life. She put on the necklace. She was no longer just the former daughter of a doctor or a runaway waitress. She was a valuable asset under the powerful protection of Silas Croft, and she knew she had to work harder than ever to earn her place. Hope wasn't about running anymore, it was about fighting alongside the devil she knew. The apartment in the skyscraper was no longer safe. The attack on the Gilded Spoon was a loud and clear declaration of war from the rival group, and Silas Croft was taking no chances. The morning after the ambush, Alana was sitting across from Silas in his office. He had changed back into his impeccable suit, but the dark circles under his eyes showed the toll the night had taken. This building is a fortress, Alana, But it's now compromised, Silas stated simply. They know you're here. They will try again, and next time, they won't hit the ground floor, they'll target the power grid or the ventilation system. The risk is too high. He stood up, walking over to the window that looked out over the massive city. You're moving into my primary residence tonight. My home. Alana felt a fresh wave of panic. Your home? Mr. Croft, I can't. I'm an employee, I'm just an analyst. I don't belong there. This isn't a discussion, Alana, Silas said, turning to face her. This is a mandatory step for your survival. My mansion, outside the city, is one of the most heavily fortified properties in the state. No one gets in without my permission. You will have a security team dedicated just to you, and you will continue your analysis work from there. You are under my roof for your protection, and that is final. The move was swift and secretive. By late afternoon, Alana was once again in the back of the black sedan with Leo, driving for nearly an hour out of the urban sprawl and into the rolling, green hills of the countryside outside Boston, Massachusetts. Silas Croft's mansion was less a house and more a fortress disguised as a stately home. It was huge, built of dark stone and covered in ivy, sitting on top of a hill and surrounded by massive iron gates and tall, thick trees. Security cameras peeked out from everywhere, and floodlights were already coming on in the twilight. Inside, the mansion was vast, quiet, and overwhelmingly luxurious. It had high ceilings, marble floors that echoed her footsteps, and huge portraits of people who looked severe and rich. She was shown to a small, comfortable guest suite that had a private bath, a sitting area, and a large bedroom. You'll have everything you need, Miss Johnson, said the polite, elderly housekeeper, a kind white woman named Elsa. But please understand, you are not permitted outside the grounds, and your door must be locked when you are inside. Alana knew she was safer here than anywhere in the world, but she also felt like a very expensive prisoner. Silas Croft lived with his core people. They weren't just bodyguards and managers. They were his inner circle, the most powerful and trusted members of his organization. They ran the empire, and they were the ones who truly hated Alana's presence. The moment Alana stepped into the executive dining room for dinner, a room that felt more like a boardroom than a place to eat, the atmosphere turned cold. The inner circle was mostly made up of hard, well-dressed people who rarely smiled. There was Ronan, who was professional but still stiff around her. There was Caleb, a quiet, intense black man who handled all the computer security and barely looked at her. And then there was Zara. Zara was Silas's second-in-command, a woman who controlled half the logistics for the entire operation. She was a stunning white woman in her early 30s, with long, sleek blonde hair and eyes the color of dark emeralds. She wore expensive clothing that made Alana's nicest dress look cheap, and she moved with a self-assured grace that spoke of total authority. Zara sat across the table from Alana, and her gaze was a physical weight, contemptuous, burning, and utterly hostile. The whispers began instantly, carried on the air like poison. Who is she? Silas moved her in overnight. She's the waitress who ruined Ronan's jacket. A waitress, living here? It makes no sense. He's giving her a whole security detail. Why is she so important? The core issue wasn't the risk she brought, it was her sudden, inexplicable proximity to Silas. Silas had never brought anyone this close to his home life before, certainly not a young woman plucked from a low-paying job. The inner circle saw her as a massive distraction and a severe threat to their carefully maintained hierarchy. The threat of jealousy. Zara's hostility was different. It wasn't about security or strategy, it was intensely personal. Zara had worked her entire life to be the closest, most trusted person to Silas. Rumors in the organization suggested their relationship was more than just professional. She was the loyal, powerful female lieutenant who stood by his side. Alana could see the dangerous spark of jealousy in Zara's eyes every time Silas spoke to her. At the end of dinner, Silas addressed Alana directly. Alana, you'll be working in the library. Ronan will bring you the new equipment and the data feed. Yes, Mr. Croft, Alana replied quietly. Zara slammed her glass down on the table, making the fine china rattle. The library? Sir, the library holds all the sensitive historical files. Why is a new analyst, who almost got Ronan shot and is a known target, being put in the most sensitive room in the house? Silas turned his cool, powerful gaze on Zara. He didn't raise his voice, but the entire room fell silent. "Zara," he said sternly, "Alana Johnson is analyzing data that is vital to the security of this organization, data you failed to find in the first place. She is also the daughter of a man who saved my brother's life. She is under my direct authority, and her placement is non-negotiable." He then looked pointedly at Alana. "The library is secured, Alana. No one gets in without your express permission." Zara's face went crimson. The public rebuke was an insult she wouldn't forget. She pushed her chair back violently and stalked out of the room without another word. As the door swung shut, Caleb leaned over to Alana and whispered, his face tight with concern, "You just made an extremely powerful enemy. She thinks you're trying to take her place. Be careful, Alana. Very careful." Alana nodded, her fear growing heavier. She had survived the rival Mafia group's attack, but now she was inside the fortress, facing the internal threats of jealousy and suspicion. Later that evening, Alana was settling into the magnificent, wood-paneled library. She was surrounded by ancient books, and a massive mahogany desk held all the new, sleek analytical equipment. Ronan was setting up the secure satellite connection. As Ronan was leaving, he paused at the door. He looked at her, and for the first time, his expression softened slightly. "Miss Johnson," he said, his voice a low rumble. "Zara is dangerous. She is loyal to the boss, but she is ruthless. She hates that you're here. She is used to being the only one Silas trusts. Do your work, keep your head down, and understand this, she will be watching every move you make." Alana looked around the luxurious room. She was safe from the outside world, yes, but she was trapped in a gilded cage with a very hungry, very jealous predator. Her debt to Silas was keeping her alive, but his protection had also painted a huge target on her back for the people who were supposed to be her allies. Her life was a high-stakes balancing act, and the slightest slip would be fatal. Alana had been living in Silas Croft's mansion for a week. Her world was reduced to the library, her apartment, and the tense, silent meals she shared with the inner circle, minus Zara, who had pointedly refused to attend dinner whenever Alana was present. The locked box, the small piece of wooden brass that contained her entire secret, was still unsolved. Silas's experts had tried everything, lasers, specialized fluids, and complex tools, but the lock was designed by a master craftsman and held firm. Silas had finally given up, placing the box on the mantel in his private study, saying they would try again later. Alana was now completely immersed in the rival syndicate's data. The work was intense, requiring long hours of staring at monitors, but she was good at it. She was piecing together a pattern, recognizing how certain seemingly random transactions linked up to form a supply chain for illegal activities, all controlled by one shadowy figure. It was a dark, stormy Tuesday evening. The mansion was typically impervious to weather, but tonight, the lightning strikes were spectacular and violent, rattling the thick glass of the library windows. Alana was deep into a spreadsheet, tracking an unusually large wire transfer to a small island nation in the Caribbean, likely Jamaica. The transaction was signed with a cryptic code that looked frustratingly familiar. Suddenly, with a deafening crack of thunder right overhead, the entire mansion was plunged into total darkness. The emergency generators kicked in immediately, but there was a brief, jarring 5-second power outage before the lights flickered back on. The sudden darkness was disorienting, and Alana felt her heart leap into her throat. During that brief moment of pitch-black chaos, Alana instinctively jumped up from her desk, knocking her chair backward. She fumbled for the edge of the heavy mahogany desk. When the warm, steady emergency lights flooded the room, Alana saw that she had backed straight into a huge, marble-topped antique table that held a heavy, ornate bronze bust, a portrait of some ancient Roman. The bust had been knocked off its stand. It lay on the thick Persian rug, completely intact. But right next to it, shattered into 3 pieces from the impact of the fall, was the small, locked wooden box. Alana gasped and rushed over. The heavy brass lock, which had survived everything, had been instantly compromised by the force of the bronze hitting the thin, brittle wood. The side of the box was cracked wide open. Alana crouched down, her hands shaking as she picked up the pieces. She hadn't broken the box, but the sheer force of the accident had. Inside the small, now shattered container, there was no master registry, no ancient scroll, and no diamonds. There was only one thing, a small, ordinary-looking USB drive. It was metal, smooth, and cold in her palm. Just as she was staring at the drive, the library door burst open. Silas Croft rushed in, followed closely by Ronan, who was already holding a tactical light and an automatic weapon. "Alana, are you hurt?" Silas demanded, his eyes scanning the room, looking for intruders. "No, Mr. Croft, I'm fine," Alana said, still staring at the pieces of the box and the tiny silver USB. "The power outage, it broke the box." Silas saw the scene, the fallen bust, the broken wood, and the silver drive in Alana's hand. His usual composure fractured. He dismissed Ronan with a sharp wave of his hand and walked quickly over to Alana. "Give me that," he ordered, his voice suddenly sharp and urgent. Alana immediately handed him the USB drive. Silas took it over to the massive computer setup on the library desk. He didn't hesitate. He plugged the small drive directly into the highly secured server. A new window popped up on the screen, labeled simply, Legacy Files. Inside were thousands of encrypted files, organized into folders with dates stretching back 20 years. Alana watched over his shoulder as Silas quickly searched. "This is it," Silas murmured, his voice hushed with realization. "Your father never kept a registry of people. He kept a registry of crimes." He clicked on a file labeled Project Chimera, Internal. The screen filled with documents, high-resolution photographs, and scanned, original letters that laid out a vast, decades-long conspiracy. "This drive contains the evidence," Silas announced, his voice growing heavy, almost a whisper. "Evidence capable of collapsing the entire rival syndicate. Every money laundering route, every political bribe, every contract, it's all here. Your father gathered it all, planning to use it as an emergency brake if his organization ever went too far." This was bigger than she ever imagined. This wasn't just proof of the rival group's activities, this was a digital weapon that could end them. Silas scrolled quickly through the files, his expression darkening with every passing second. He stopped suddenly on a single, high-definition photograph. The picture was old and slightly faded, showing three men standing together on a yacht, laughing, decades ago. They were all young, confident, and powerful. One was Alana's father, Elias Johnson. The second was the shadowy leader of the rival syndicate, the man they had only known as the Shadow. Alana had only seen blurry photos, but the face in this clear picture was unmistakable. And the third man? Silas Croft stared at the picture, his face turning pale and rigid, completely drained of color. He reached out a trembling finger and pointed to the man in the middle, the one who was now the leader of the syndicate that destroyed Alana's family. "This man," Silas said, his voice low and ragged, "is Arthur Kane." Alana gasped. That name, Arthur Kane, meant nothing to her, but the look on Silas's face was one of profound, cold fury. Silas slowly leaned back in his chair, his ice-blue eyes now burning with an ancient pain. He looked at Alana, then back at the picture of the three laughing young men. "Years ago," Silas began, his voice barely audible, "before the Croft organization became what it is now, my family was almost destroyed by a betrayal from within. A massive, catastrophic betrayal that cost me a great deal, including the life of my own mentor." He pointed again at Arthur Kane's younger, smiling face in the photo. "The man who destroyed your family, the leader of the entire rival syndicate, is the same man who once betrayed me." Silas slammed his hand down on the desk, the sound echoing through the room. "Arthur Kane. He was one of my most trusted strategists. He stole my proprietary information, he framed my brother for a crime he didn't commit, and he walked away, leaving me to clean up the mess and rebuild everything from scratch. I've been hunting him for 20 years, believing he was dead or hiding in Russia." He looked at the USB drive, then back at Alana. The debt he owed her father was real, but now his mission was personal. "Your father, Elias," Silas realized, a deep respect dawning in his eyes. "He wasn't just hiding this evidence from Arthur Kane's people. He was hiding it from me too. He knew that the only way to truly stop Kane was to expose him to the world, not just use my organization's methods." Alana stared at the screen, the pieces of the puzzle snapping violently into place. Her whole life of running, the burning house, the spilled drink, the deadly feud, it all came down to one man, Arthur Kane, the villain who was both her family's destroyer and Silas Croft's ancient enemy. Silas's expression changed from anger to a cold, frightening resolve. This wasn't just business anymore, it was retribution. He looked at Alana, his eyes filled with a new seriousness. Alana, the game just changed entirely. This drive means we don't just survive, we dismantle him completely. But Arthur Kane is going to kill us both to stop this from being released. Our fight just became a whole lot bigger. He took a deep breath, composed himself, and gave her a thin, intense smile. I promise to find your cousin Marcus and give you your life back. Now, I will do more than that. We are going to destroy the man who destroyed both of our families. We do this together, Alana. The fear was still there, but it was now overshadowed by a powerful sense of joint purpose and justice. The accidental opening of the box had not brought despair, it had brought the ultimate weapon against their shared enemy. The tension in Silas Croft's mansion was thick enough to cut with a knife. The discovery of the USB drive, coupled with the revelation that the rival syndicate's leader, Arthur Kane, was Silas's old, powerful traitor, had raised the stakes to an impossible level. Alana and Silas spent the next 2 days practically locked in the library, poring over the legacy files. Alana used her analytical skills, honed by years of her father's secret training, to rapidly decode and organize the vast amount of evidence. Silas, meanwhile, used his knowledge of Arthur Kane's methods to understand the weak points in the rival syndicate's armor. They had a plan: use the financial data from the USB drive to launch a series of legal and economic strikes against Kane's empire, crippling him before he could retaliate. To execute the plan, Silas had to involve a few of his top people: Ronan, for security, Caleb, for digital execution, and a few others to prep the necessary resources. He chose his people carefully, giving each only a small, isolated piece of information. The one person Silas still trusted implicitly, despite the tension, was Zara. She was the one who managed the external communications and the flow of logistics for the organization. He gave her a task that, while important, contained no direct information about the USB drive itself. Alana felt a persistent, cold dread around Zara. The female lieutenant had been making cutting comments at every opportunity, her emerald eyes tracking Alana with thinly veiled hatred. Just as Alana and Silas were about to finalize the first phase of their attack, the quiet safety of the mansion was violently shattered. It was midnight. The storm from the night the box opened was long gone, replaced by a still, quiet night. Alana was asleep, exhausted from the long hours of coding, when the alarm system, usually a gentle, low hum, suddenly became a shrieking, piercing siren. Alana bolted upright in bed. She didn't hesitate. She grabbed the silver distress beacon necklace Silas had given her and pressed the button just as heavy, rapid footsteps pounded outside her door. Before Ronan could arrive, Alana heard the terrifying sound of her apartment door being blown off its hinges with a dull, heavy thud. 3 dark figures, masked and carrying heavy weapons, rushed into her room. They were fast, efficient, and they knew exactly where she was. They weren't looking for a struggle, they were looking for a clean grab and extraction. "Get up. Now," one of the attackers barked, grabbing her arm. Alana fought back, twisting and kicking, her heart hammering wildly. She was terrified, but the survival training her father had taught her kicked in. She screamed, not from fear, but to disorient them. The fight was immediately interrupted by a hail of gunfire from the hallway. Ronan, along with 2 other security guards, had arrived in less than the promised 60 seconds. The mansion turned into a war zone. Glass shattered, plaster flew, and the air was filled with the deafening report of weapons. Alana ducked behind a heavy mahogany wardrobe as Silas Croft's men fought the intruders. The battle lasted only a few minutes. The intruders were highly trained, but Silas's security was massive and overwhelming. 2 of the attackers were neutralized, but one managed to escape through a shattered window, carrying a small, sophisticated radio device. When the chaos finally stopped, Alana was trembling, completely shaken. Silas Croft appeared in the doorway, wearing only a pair of dark pants, his face hard and furious. He saw the damage to the room, the bullet holes, and Alana hiding behind the wardrobe. "Clear the room." Silas roared at his guards. "Ronan, seal the entire perimeter. Lock down the library server. Now." The precision of the attack. Alana was moved to a secure bunker deep beneath the mansion. Once the dust settled, she and Silas faced each other in the cold, windowless room. "They shouldn't have known you were here," Silas stated, his voice tight with controlled rage. "We moved you in under the cover of a massive system transfer. No one outside my inner circle knew your exact location. Alana wrapped a blanket around her shoulders, trying to stop the shivering. They knew which room was mine, Mr. Croft. They hit the door first. It wasn't a search, it was a raid. Silas walked over to a map of the mansion displayed on a digital screen. He pointed to the path the attackers had taken. This is the damning evidence, Alana, he said, tapping the screen. They didn't come in through the main gates, which would have triggered the heat sensors. They didn't come through the heavily guarded west wall. He traced a line across the map. They came in through the old utility tunnels that run beneath the east wing. Those tunnels haven't been used in 30 years. The access point is completely hidden behind a dry well and requires a highly specific electronic key code to open. Alana's eyes widened with the realization. No outside group would know about that. Only someone who has lived here, or worked here for decades. Silas turned, his blue eyes sharp and utterly cold. Exactly. Only 6 people in this entire organization even knew that utility entrance still existed, let alone had the access code to disable the alarms for it. The reality slammed into them both. Someone close to the boss, someone he trusted, was secretly working against him. Suspicion spread instantly. Ronan and Caleb were brought into the bunker. They were furious about the infiltration, but their eyes kept flicking to the list of the 6 people who knew the tunnel code. Asterisk Silas Croft, the boss. Asterisk Elsa, the housekeeper, 30 years of service. Asterisk Caleb, IT and digital security. Asterisk Ronan, head of personal security. Asterisk and Zara, chief of logistics and operations. Elsa was an old, gentle woman who had nursed Silas through a sickness years ago. Caleb and Ronan had been vetted and proved their loyalty in countless violent encounters. Elsa would never do this, Ronan stated flatly, running a huge hand over his shaved head. She's practically family. Caleb nodded agreement. And Ronan and I were together, working the servers in the south wing when the alarm went off. That leaves only one person who had both the knowledge and the motive. Alana didn't have to say the name. They all knew it. Zara. She had the knowledge of the mansion's deepest secrets. She had the access to the necessary codes. And she had the powerful, dangerous motive of blinding jealousy and fear over Alana's rapid ascent and proximity to Silas. She knew the attack was tonight, Silas concluded, his voice low and heavy with the weight of betrayal. She wasn't trying to help Kane take the organization. She was trying to eliminate the threat to her power, Alana and the USB drive. She leaked the location, knowing Kane would send men to retrieve the file and take out Alana. Silas ran a hand over his face. The physical violence of the attack had been terrible, but the realization of the betrayal inside his own house was far more devastating. He had staked his trust on a woman who had worked by his side for years, and that misplaced trust had nearly cost Alana her life, and his organization everything. He looked at Alana, his expression filled with grim resolution. The game isn't just about Arthur Kane anymore, Alana. It's about cleaning house. Zara has to be handled. And she won't go down without a fight. Alana knew the score. She wasn't just a survivor anymore, she was an active participant in a war, and the enemy was now right down the hall. The morning after the midnight attack, the atmosphere in the mansion had shifted from tense to poisonous. Zara was gone, having slipped away during the chaos, proving her guilt. Silas had put out a high-priority alert on her, but the immediate threat was the suspicion that still lingered and the certainty that Arthur Kane would strike again soon. Alana was moved out of her damaged suite and into an apartment right next to Silas's private quarters, putting her directly under his protection, but also further fueling the remaining jealousy within the organization. Her new workspace was a small, high-tech room inside the secure bunker, where she continued analyzing the USB drive's data, trying to find any immediate vulnerabilities in Kane's structure that weren't listed in the older files. Alana was still deeply distrustful of everyone in Silas's inner circle, especially Ronan. Ronan, the massive, imposing head of security, was the one person who had consistently given Alana the most intense, cold stares. His face was usually a blank mask, his posture rigid, and his words minimal. He was the one whose expensive jacket she had ruined, the one who looked like he believed every negative rumor about her. She was terrified of him, and she was certain his loyalty to Silas was the only thing stopping him from treating her like dirt. Around 3 o'clock that afternoon, Silas had to leave the mansion for a crucial, face-to-face meeting with an old contact, a risky but necessary move to secure more resources against Kane. He had left Alana under the direct, watchful guard of Ronan and Caleb. Alana had just finished printing out a batch of complex financial reports, evidence of Kane routing funds through a shell company in the Netherlands, when the alarm on her security panel suddenly went haywire, switching from green to flashing red. Caleb, who was in the adjacent command center, immediately yelled, "Intruder alert. Section 4 perimeter breach. It's one target, moving fast." Before anyone could react, the door to Alana's secure room was thrown open. It wasn't Ronan or Caleb. A man Alana didn't recognize stood in the doorway. He was small, wiry, and dressed entirely in black. He was wearing a dark ski mask, but his eyes, glinting with frightening focus, fixed instantly on Alana. He was holding a silenced pistol aimed straight at her chest. An assassin. The assassin was shockingly fast. He didn't waste time talking, he raised the gun and pulled the trigger. Alana froze, closing her eyes, bracing for the impact. But the sound she heard wasn't a bullet hitting her. It was a loud, sickening thud and a muffled grunt of pain, followed by the clatter of the assassin's gun hitting the floor. Alana opened her eyes. Ronan was there. He hadn't stopped to grab a weapon from his holster. He had simply launched his massive body across the room, intercepting the assassin's move. Ronan, the man she thought hated her, was now locked in a brutal, silent fight with the attacker. Ronan didn't use finesse, he used pure, crushing force. He slammed the smaller man into the wall, breaking his nose with a single, massive elbow strike. The assassin fought dirty, slashing at Ronan's shoulder with a hidden knife. Ronan barely flinched. He simply ended the fight with a devastating blow to the side of the assassin's neck. The assassin dropped to the floor, unconscious. Ronan stood over him, breathing heavily. He was physically fine, but there was a dark, spreading stain of blood soaking quickly into the shoulder of his black tactical shirt where the knife had grazed him. Caleb and 2 other guards rushed in, securing the unconscious man. Ronan ignored them all. He turned, facing Alana. His eyes were no longer cold, they were dark, intense, and filled with an emotion she couldn't name. "Are you hurt, Alana?" he asked, his voice rough and deep. He had used her real name, not Miss Johnson. "No, I'm fine," Alana stammered, still reeling from the shock. "You saved me. You took the blow." Ronan looked down at his bleeding shoulder, then back up at her. He walked over to her desk, ignoring the widening pool of blood on his shirt, and gently picked up the reports she had been printing. "You need to hide this," he commanded, gesturing to the financial evidence of Kane's operation. "Now. They came for you, but they also came for what you have." Caleb rushed in, urging Ronan to get medical attention. Ronan waved him off impatiently, keeping his eyes fixed on Alana. "Get the medic, Caleb, and lock the drive down," Ronan ordered. "Now." Caleb left. Ronan stood there, a formidable, imposing figure, his breathing slowly returning to normal. Alana finally found her voice. "Ronan, why?" The giant man looked around the empty room, making sure they were truly alone. He leaned against the desk, putting a heavy hand over his injured shoulder. He looked tired, but his gaze was direct and serious. "I haven't told Silas this yet," Ronan admitted, his voice a low confession. "And I want you to keep it that way for now. But I know why Arthur Kane is so desperate to silence you." He took a deep breath, and his cold mask finally cracked. "Your father, Dr. Elias Johnson, saved my life, Alana. Years ago, before I ever worked for Silas Croft, I was involved in a mess overseas in Jamaica. I was young, stupid, and took a bullet that should have killed me. I was bleeding out in a hidden safe house." He paused, running a hand over his clean-shaven jaw. "Your father, Dr. Johnson, was traveling in the area, running some sort of medical mission. He wasn't supposed to be there, but he arrived. He worked on me for 12 straight hours, risking his own life, using equipment he had brought. He asked no questions about how I got shot. He only focused on saving me." Ronan looked her straight in the eye, his expression now one of fierce loyalty. "He told me, 'You owe me nothing, but if you ever get a second chance at life, don't waste it on violence.' I took his advice. I came back, cleaned up, and eventually came to work for Silas, becoming his head of security." Alana felt a wave of profound emotion. All the cold stares, all the harsh looks, hadn't been hatred. They had been the silent, intense focus of a man protecting a sacred trust. "The day you spilled the drink on me," Ronan confessed, a faint, almost imperceptible smile touching his lips, "I knew exactly who you were. Your eyes, the way you moved, you looked just like him. That's why I didn't say a word. I knew I couldn't hurt the daughter of the man who gave me my second chance." He straightened up, his mission now clear. "Zara hated you because she thought you were a threat to Silas. But I looked harsh because I had to be silent, watching, waiting for the real danger to hit you." He took a single, slow step toward her. His voice became a solid promise. "You are not just Silas's asset, Alana. You are my debt. I owe your father everything. From this moment on, protecting you becomes my sole mission. Not just from Arthur Kane, but from anyone else in this organization who thinks they can harm you. You are safe with me." Alana looked at the giant man, the scar from the knife already visible through the tear in his shirt. He was not the cold, heartless enforcer she thought he was. He was a man of immense, quiet gratitude, willing to bleed for the daughter of his savior. The fear she had felt toward him vanished, replaced by a deep, unwavering trust and relief. Ronan gave her a final nod, and then turned toward the door as the medic arrived. Alana stood alone, looking at the financial reports and the shattered remains of the assassin's failed mission. The people she thought were her enemies were becoming her protectors, and the hope for justice, now shared by this powerful man, felt closer than ever before. The revelation about Ronan completely changed the dynamics inside the mansion. His confession, that he owed his life to Alana's father, Dr. Elias Johnson, lifted a huge weight of suspicion from her mind. With Ronan now her silent, immovable shield, Alana could finally focus her sharp mind entirely on the legacy files from the USB drive. Ronan, with his arm bandaged but his intensity undiminished, moved his command post right outside the bunker door. He was a constant, formidable presence, making it impossible for anyone to approach Alana unvetted. Alana was using the coded keys her father had used in his files to unlock the deepest levels of the data. She wasn't just finding financial evidence anymore, she was finding historical records. She tracked the early movements of the rival syndicate's leader, Arthur Kane, learning how he moved from being Silas's trusted strategist to becoming the head of a massive, separate criminal empire. She found a folder labeled Origins and Charter Documents. Alana clicked on it, her heart thumping in her chest. The documents were dated nearly 70 years ago, written in elegant, looping script on ancient, heavy parchment. They weren't just business records, they were a founding charter. The document outlined the creation of a vast, secretive network, a council, not a crime syndicate, designed to manage and control all illicit trade in the major US and Canadian cities, ensuring stability and minimal violence. It was essentially the constitution of the entire criminal underworld in their region. Alana scanned the list of founding members. The name at the very top, signed with a complex, elaborate flourish, was Solomon Johnson. Alana gasped, leaning back sharply in her chair. Solomon Johnson. That was her great-grandfather. She quickly cross-referenced the names. The charter wasn't signed by 5 families, it was signed by 4. The 4 most powerful, original families in the region's underworld. The documents revealed a truth she had never, ever imagined. Her family was not just rich, they were the original architects, the literal founders, of the entire criminal underworld in the city. They were the royalty, the ones who set the rules and controlled the peace. Alana's father, Dr. Elias Johnson, hadn't been a surgeon who happened to get involved in shady dealings. He had been a brilliant surgeon who used his respected public life as the perfect cover to discreetly run one of the oldest, most powerful organizations in North America. The rival syndicate led by Arthur Kane was not a rival at all. It was an opportunistic, violent breakaway faction, a group of traitors who tried to seize power from the legitimate founders, the Johnsons. The fire, the murder of her family, the disappearance of Marcus, it was all an organized coup to destroy the Johnson bloodline and seize the legacy files, which essentially served as the original legal deed to the entire criminal empire. Alana immediately called Silas. He rushed from his private quarters, his face serious, and stared at the screens Alana had laid out. He read the founding charter, his blue eyes moving rapidly over the old signatures, his expression growing steadily colder and more impressed. "Elias never told me," Silas whispered, running a hand over the founding signature of Solomon Johnson. I always thought the Johnsons were an old, powerful organization, but never this. They weren't just powerful, they were the crown. He looked at Alana with a new, intense respect, the respect due to an equal, or perhaps even a superior. Alana, Silas said, slowly realizing the full weight of the situation. Your family founded this entire structure. Your father was the last active blood descendant of the founder. When Arthur Kane murdered your father and his brothers, he wasn't just eliminating enemies. He was executing a regicide. Silas walked around the desk, stopping right in front of her. He looked down at the young woman who had been a timid waitress just weeks ago. This changes everything, he stated firmly. The legacy files are not just evidence, they are the legal foundation of this world. They prove that your bloodline, the Johnson family, are the true, rightful owners and controllers of this massive empire. He pointed to the folder on the screen. And you, Alana, you are the rightful heir. You are the last surviving blood descendant of the founder. Alana felt faint. She wasn't just running from a greedy uncle or a mob boss. She was running from a usurper, a traitor who had seized her family's throne. That's why he wants me dead so badly, Alana whispered, the realization hitting her like a physical blow. He doesn't just want the files, he wants to erase my bloodline completely so there is no one left to challenge his claim. He needs to kill me to rewrite history. Silas nodded grimly. Exactly. He thought he destroyed the files, and he thought he killed the family. You, Alana, are the living proof that both survived. If Arthur Kane knew you had this drive, he wouldn't send masked assassins, he would send everything he has. Silas's motivation shifted again. His debt to her father was now amplified by the sheer, overwhelming power Alana represented. Protecting her was no longer just repayment of a favor, it was a matter of securing the legitimate power structure of the entire criminal network, a structure Silas himself relied upon for stability. The rules are about to change, Alana, Silas declared, a cold, fierce light in his eyes. We stop thinking like a defensive organization and start thinking like a royal family fighting to reclaim its throne. Your father knew this day would come, and he left you the weapon. We have to use it now. He turned and addressed Ronan, who was standing like a statue at the door. Ronan, from this moment on, your priority is no longer just the immediate security of Alana. It is the security of the heir to the foundation. Double the detail. Anyone who approaches her is to be considered hostile. No exceptions. Ronan, without hesitation, gave a sharp, formal nod. Understood, boss. Alana looked at the screen, at the ancient signatures that tied her to a legacy of dangerous power. She was no longer just fighting for a safe life, she was fighting for her birthright, her family's justice, and the restoration of a massive empire. The weight of the world was now on her young shoulders, but with Silas and Ronan by her side, she felt an unstoppable, fiery determination. She looked at Silas. Mr. Croft, what do we do first? First, Silas replied, a thin smile of pure strategy spreading across his face. We are going to hit Arthur Kane where he thinks he's untouchable. We are going to reclaim your cousin, Marcus. He is our final piece of leverage. The truth, that Alana was the rightful heir to the foundation, had solidified the resolve of Silas Croft and his entire organization. They weren't just fighting to survive a betrayal, they were fighting to restore the balance of the criminal underworld and take down the usurper, Arthur Kane. Silas knew that with the exposure of the legacy files, Kane wouldn't waste time with small, subtle attacks. He would launch one, massive, decisive blow. Alana, Ronan, and Silas spent the next 48 hours preparing the mansion for the inevitable. Ronan moved his most loyal, most experienced men to the perimeter, and Caleb armed the digital defenses, ready to release the core data of the legacy files into the public domain if they were overrun. The attack came just before dawn. It wasn't silent or subtle. It was a loud, horrifying wave of aggression. The air was ripped apart by the sound of explosions as vehicles, loaded with explosives, breached the massive perimeter gates. The floodlights in the compound shattered, plunging the lawns into chaos. Silas had assembled his full forces in the mansion's main hall. He stood at the center, flanked by Ronan, who was armed and ready, and Alana, who stood a little behind them, clutching a small, discreet digital communicator. They're coming through the North Service Road. Ronan barked into his headset, his face grim. "Divert Unit 3 to the East Wing." The fight was intense, echoing the emotional fury of a long-simmering feud. This wasn't a skirmish, it was a brutal showdown. Silas, moving with the practiced swiftness of a commander, directed his men. He was shouting commands, pushing his forces back against the relentless waves of Kane's attackers who, fueled by desperate hatred, were swarming the mansion. Alana watched the battle rage on the monitors in the secure hall, the reality of the violence shocking her. She saw men she recognized, kitchen staff, cleaners, drivers, all loyal to Silas, fighting and falling in defense of the mansion, and in defense of her. Suddenly, Ronan yelled, "Boss! Look out!" On one of the security feeds, they saw a team of 4 elite operatives breach the interior defense line. They were carrying specialized gear, ignoring the guards, and heading straight for the main hall. They weren't there to fight the battle, they were there to kill the heir and the boss. They are bypassing the security grid. They're coming straight for the main hall. Caleb shouted, his fingers flying across his keyboard. Silas drew the weapon he kept hidden in his jacket and stepped forward. "Ronan, get Alana out through the bunker entrance. Now." "No," Alana said, her voice quiet but firm. Ronan, who was already reaching for her arm, stopped dead. Alana stepped out from behind the 2 men. She was wearing a simple, dark suit Silas had given her, no longer the waitress uniform, but the smart, serious attire of an executive. She looked at the men who were about to risk everything for her. The 4 elite attackers burst through the main double doors, scattering splinters and dust everywhere. They saw Silas, Ronan, and the slim young woman standing in the center of the hall. The lead assassin, a tall, menacing man with cold eyes, raised his rifle, aiming directly at Silas Croft's chest. In that heart-stopping moment, before anyone could react, Alana moved. She didn't reach for a weapon. She stepped forward, out of Ronan's protective shadow, and raised her hand, palm out, in a clear, universal sign of command. Her voice, which had always been quiet and nervous, now rang through the chaotic hall, clear, bold, and fiercely authoritative. She didn't sound like a waitress, she sounded like a queen. "Stop," she commanded. The 4 assassins froze, shocked by the sudden, unfamiliar voice of command. They had expected Silas Croft to shout or Ronan to charge. They hadn't expected the target to step forward and address them like they were wayward servants. "You have been sent here by a traitor," Alana continued, her voice resonating with an icy calm that came from deep within her Johnson bloodline. "You fight for Arthur Kane, a man who betrayed the Foundation and assassinated the rightful bloodline." She didn't plead or beg. She took out her phone and, using the special code Caleb had set up, flashed a single, complex image on her screen. It was a high-resolution copy of the founding charter, prominently displaying the signature of Solomon Johnson. "Look at this," she commanded. "I am Alana Johnson, the daughter of Elias Johnson. I am the heir to the Foundation. You are attacking the very structure you were sworn to protect." The assassins hesitated. The criminal underworld was built on codes and loyalty, and the sight of the original charter, the proof of the Johnson lineage, caused a visible flicker of doubt in their eyes. The lead assassin, however, was clearly loyal to Kane. He shook off the shock, snarling, and swung his rifle back toward Silas. "It doesn't matter. Kane is the new rule," he yelled, tightening his finger on the trigger. Silas, realizing the assassin had broken the spell, lunged forward, but he was too late. Alana moved again, proving her courage not with a gun, but with her wits and body. She didn't have time to process the danger. She instinctively launched herself forward, not at the assassin, but right in front of Silas Croft. She smashed her shoulder into his side, throwing him violently off balance and out of the line of fire just as the assassin's gun roared. The bullet missed Silas's head by inches, burying itself deeply into the stone wall behind them. Before the assassin could cycle the weapon, Ronan erupted into motion. He was already close, and with a guttural roar of protective rage, he launched himself at the lead assassin, tackling him and ending the threat with a swift, final blow. The remaining 3 assassins dropped their weapons and raised their hands in surrender, their eyes fixed on Alana. They realized they had been sent on a treacherous mission against the true authority. The main hall fell into a stunned silence. The sound of the remaining battle outside slowly began to die down as Kane's forces, seeing their internal strike team fail, began to retreat. Silas slowly sat up, his suit rumpled, his face etched with shock and overwhelming relief. He looked up at Alana, who was breathing heavily, her heart pounding, but otherwise unharmed. "You saved my life," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "You risked everything." Alana knelt beside him, steadying him. She wasn't shaking anymore. The fear was replaced by the terrifying, exhilarating surge of her own inner strength. "I won't let a traitor win, Mr. Croft," Alana said, her voice now completely steady. "Not against my family, and not against those who protect me." By the time the sun fully rose, the battle was over. Arthur Kane's final, desperate attempt had been utterly crushed. Silas Croft stood in the center of the damaged hall, surrounded by his weary but victorious men. He looked at Alana, who stood tall next to Ronan, her back straight, a natural gravity radiating from her. He didn't just see the daughter of his savior, he saw the future. He saw the person who, in the heat of a brutal fight, had stepped forward, commanded attention, and saved the boss's life. Silas cleared his throat and addressed his entire, battle-hardened organization, his voice amplified by the cavernous hall. "Arthur Kane's reign of terror is over. He is routed, and his conspiracy against the Foundation has failed." He paused, his blue eyes sweeping over the exhausted faces of his men. "But the Foundation must now be restored to its rightful authority." He turned, placing a respectful hand on Alana's shoulder. "She is Alana Johnson, the rightful heir. She saved this organization tonight with her courage and her command. We do not just serve a boss anymore. We serve a rising queen." The men, who had been whispering about the Waitress for weeks, now looked at Alana with a blend of awe, respect, and renewed loyalty. They had seen her step into the fire and command the surrender of the enemy. By the end of the reckoning, one thing became absolutely clear: Alana was no longer a frightened waitress. She had survived a betrayal, a high-stakes chess game, and a final, bloody battle. She was powerful, she was fierce, and she was the embodiment of the justice they craved. The entire city, the entire criminal network, and the world of the powerful must now prepare for her return. Her throne was waiting. That was the showdown. If Alana's transformation into a true leader has left you speechless, share this video right now. Next, we bring Marcus home and secure Alana's reign.